When you hear a great blues turnaround, it really grabs your ear. But what if you only know that one cliche and, dare I say, a little bit boring turnaround? You know the one. Now, don't get me wrong, that has its place, and if you're not familiar with that and you haven't learned it, especially as a beginner, you should definitely do it. It's got some great structure and it will work. But what if you're ready to grow beyond that and spice things up a little bit? Well, in this lesson, I've got 3 ways to beat the boredom when it comes to your blues turnarounds. Let's get into it. One way to kind of break free from that standard structure of a turnaround is to avoid using chromatics, and kind of a little bonus point here, avoid using the pedal tone. So what I'm talking about is chromatics just meaning moving everything down a half step or even up a half step. You hear that as well. And the pedal tone is, for instance, illustrated in this one. It's got both of these things, this decline, descending chromatic run, but we pedal with that root note, the E on top. Sounds great, right? I mean, it's the classic turnaround, but if you're looking to stretch your boundaries of what you call a turnaround and really kind of stay true to the function of it, which is to kind of bring you back around to the start of a blues progression, try something like this out. We're going to start thinking about it when we get the 5 chord down to the 4, and then here we are, bar 11, and it's time to start the turnaround. And here's one as an example that you could do. So we didn't do any chromatic lines and we didn't do a pedal tone there, but it served its function. We're going to be able to use that to turn us back around and get us back to the 1 chord, start the progression over again. Now let's take a look at this specific example, but this is just an example. You could, I'm sure, come up with a pretty cool lick on your own. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just by getting in the frame of mind of playing a lick instead of that tried and true line, you're going to stumble on some creativity. But here's what we've got here for our example. Key of G, so we're starting on the root for the first beat. Then we're going to start on the flat 7, F on the 4th string. Then we're going to kind of roll up in a triplet move right here. So we've got 1 and 2 triplet. So that's kind of like the Chuck Berry thing, right? But we're playing it on strings 4, 3, and 2 there. And again, the notes G, the B flat, and then the D, before sliding up to the D on the 3rd string there. And if you do that with your ring finger, you can catch your F on the 2nd string, nice and cozy right there. And you can do that classic sounding thing where you slide back down and then pull off and let that B flat sound on your way back to the root. And then here's something, if you're looking for a creative spot and you're playing, try some double stops. We're going to really do that a couple times in this measure. We're going to bar across the C and the E, then kind of stand that up, catch the G, then you can catch the bar on those 2 strings, the 3rd and 2nd string, but this time at the 3rd fret here. Do that in a triplet rhythm. Pull off from the root down to the flat 7, so G down to F, and land on the D on the 5th string. And that is the real important part. You know, a lot of these turnarounds kind of end with a big statement, the 5 chord, and that is very functional because once you hit that 5 chord, it has a strong pull and wants to really resolve back to the 1, and that's very likely where your progression is going to start. So that's why this works. You know, you're staying entirely in the key of G with the lick. But when you hit that 5 right there, and not just that this is 3 5s, right? That's the 5 chord, the 5th fret, 5th string, so triple 5s. But once you hit that, like, you know that this is done, that line is done, and you're ready to go back to the beginning of the progression. Now, another way that you can really beat boredom when it comes to playing the turnaround is to reverse it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, a typical turnaround starts out on the 1 chord, right? And then we move into bar 12, where we generally split it between the 1 chord and the 5 chord, kind of like the structure we just laid out in that lick-based example. But what if we instead took bar 11 and made it our 5 chord? Bar 12 is back on the 1 chord. We can do that. And we'll take some inspiration here from Blind Lemon Jefferson's Black Horse Blues. And he's got a cool turnaround that starts on the 5 chord, in the case of that song, G, and it sounds like this. And we end on C, and then he strums out a little bit and then begins the progression over again. What we're going to do is move that into the key of E. So if we're going to start our 5 chord here, that's going to be B. All right, so we start here on the 7th fret and we do a little chromatic walk down. All right, but we're doing this over the 5 chord. That to me makes this chromatic walk down interesting, and then we finish it out with a really cool classic sounding country blues lick. I love that, where we're moving from the G sharp down to G. You could do that if you want to, but then we're just kind of doing a triplet there between our E and the C sharp there. And then I'm really kind of in place to just kind of do that strum out on an E chord. This is a little E major triad here. So when we put all this together, we'll get this. Definitely something that breaks the mold a little bit, because the next part of the progression is going to start on our 1 chord, whatever it may be, wherever you're taking this thing. But this works really cool in a country blues setting. All right, this last turnaround is inspired by the Jimmy Reed tune, Baby What You Want Me to Do. Great blues shuffle happening there. And what we're going to do is use some really cool articulation to kind of bring out the turnaround. We're not doing this classic thing, which would work perfectly in a tune like that. Very classic shuffle sound, but what we're going to do instead is this. All right, so as you can tell, we really called out this one note. I mean, there are other notes in this turnaround lick for sure, but we're in the key of E, and we made it well known by using this punctuation on the note. And how we're doing that is we're striking the string, and it all happens in starting at beat 2. So beat 1 is the open string, and then we hammer on to the E note on the 4th string 3 times in a triplet rhythm. So 1, 2, triplet. And then we do it again, and then an open string, that open D. 1, 2, triplet, 3, and. All right, which is kind of cool to have that D, that flat 7 of the key, kind of ringing for a second. Then we do this triplet move, the G, the open E, and then the higher octave E here. Come back to start out bar 12, come back to the E. Hit our G for this triplet, then the E, then the open D, and then we're here at the B for that 5. So we still are really making it known when we hit that 5 chord. If you can imagine a band behind you, that's really going to pack a punch. But really what's packing a big punch is making this much fuss about that E note there at the start of this turnaround. So that's another way that you can really dial in some creativity when it comes to your turnarounds. If you're looking for more great turnarounds, then check out this video where I've got some really cool ones to share with you. And then come on back next Tuesday for another great acoustic blues. I'll see you there. Until then, practice smart and play on.